In episode 132 for August 3rd, 2020, how the big tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, and Twitter collect your private data and how you can delete it with Kira Rakova from Undatify. I want to let you know about a great deal that our sponsor Silentpocket has going on right now for a limited time, and that's their Privacy Starter Kit. Silentpocket's Privacy Starter Kit includes a medium-sized Faraday sleeve for your smartphone, a flexible key fob guard to protect your car from theft, and privacy stickers for your laptop and smartphone. This is everything you need to really step up your digital privacy. Pick up your starter kit today by visiting sharedsecurity.net/privacykit, and don't forget to use discount code SHAREDSECURITY to take 15% off your order.
Hi, it's Scott Wright here from ClickArmor with an early reminder that October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And don't you think it's time to put some fun and innovation into your security awareness training program? ClickArmor is the first gamified learning platform that helps build cyber herd immunity within your organization. Our innovative gamified learning challenges and exercises are perfect for helping people experience real-life risks and helping you measure your own team's vulnerability and proficiency. Whether you need to quickly deploy a training solution that gets people to stop clicking on things, or you have your own boring content that just needs to be put into a more interesting user experience, ClickArmor can help. So please go to clickarmor.ca/sharedsecurity to find out how you can build cyber herd immunity in your organization.
Well, again, thanks for coming on the show. And I think this is a really important topic. I get a lot of questions from our listeners about, what type of information I'm giving to the big tech companies. So Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple is really the companies that we want to focus this episode on. But before we get into all that, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your company, Undatify?
Sure, no problem. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. So as you said, my name is Kira, and I am the communications manager at Undatify. And Undatify is a startup that helps people exercise their rights under the GDPR. So essentially, we have a legal bot that helps guide people through the process of communicating with companies about their data. So it can help you either get a copy of your data or delete your data, and provides you kind of with personalized advice based on your situation and what the company is saying back to you. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So how long you been at Undatify?
So I've been at Undatify for about 2 years, and kind of one of the main reasons why I decided to join the project is because I've been in communication social media for a couple of years, and I've always found it interesting kind of how to balance privacy and people kind of sharing their stories. So a lot of community building obviously involves, having people share their stories, write about it, talk about it, but it also kind of leads to a number of issues on how to do that safely, privately, and how do you kind of manage that content if the person decides not to, publish it or decides to take it down for whatever reasons.
Yeah, this is a huge topic, and it's becoming, more of a problem because I think the more data that we give these companies, the harder it is for us to control what they do with that information.
Right.
And, that's, I think the reason for this episode is really to put some focus on that. So when we use services from the big tech companies, like I mentioned, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Twitter, why is it important to know what data is collected about us?
So I feel like this question comes up a lot, right? It's kind of like the myth of, well, I have nothing to hide. Why should I care? And I think that, there's a number of reasons why people should care, but the kind of top 3 reasons that I would like to highlight today is, well, first of all, just because you have nothing to hide doesn't mean that you necessarily want other people to have access to that information. So for example, how comfortable would you be with strangers reading all your Facebook messages, or, knowing everywhere you've been in the past week? Might not necessarily be something that you want to hide, but it is personal. It is your private information that you don't necessarily want others to have access to. The kind of second reason why I believe that you should care about these things, is that organizations are using, selling, processing your data in kind of ways that we aren't even aware of. We don't understand. And a lot of times, it has an impact on our lives that we're not fully aware of. So a good example of this is micro-targeting, right? Micro-targeting is essentially, when advertisers use platforms like Google or Facebook and target people based on very specific things. So not demographics, not just based on their gender or whatever, but something like an interest in mental health or, an interest in a particular political party or something like that. And we've seen issues arise with this with Cambridge Analytica, where, there's instances of political manipulation or other types of manipulation that has been happening on the basis of these very specific characteristics of people. And kind of the third point that I want to bring up is, of course, there's always the risk of data breaches and hackers, right? So the more information that's out there about you that you don't know about, that's being sold, transferred to other organizations, the more likely it is that, somewhere there's going to be a data leak or a data breach and your information is going to be in the wrong hands.
Yeah. So how do the big tech companies typically collect our personal data? I mean, this is much more than just gathering your cookies, right, from your web browser.
Right. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, of course, there are, tracking technologies such as cookies and pixels where, it's not only kind of the sites themselves. It's not just Facebook itself that's collecting data about you on its website. It's also, advertisers or other organizations that use these cookies and pixels on their websites. So, you go online shopping, you find even like a boutique kind of, online store, you buy something and they have that tracking technology because they use Facebook to do ad campaigns. So they pass that info onto Facebook so that they can get that statistics, but also obviously Facebook gets that data. But also, it is a lot of the data that you provide yourself. And it's not necessarily data that you're kind of aware that you're sharing. So for example, with Google, right? Obviously we all know that they get some kind of information based on your searches and so on. But a lot of people don't know, for example, that every time you make a purchase using your Gmail account and you get a receipt, that actually gets saved by Google. So there is a section of your Google account where you can go and see all the different purchases. And it literally has, like 10 years ago, you used this Google account to purchase this. And there's actually, as far as I know, last time I checked, there's no way to delete this data unless you completely delete, all of your Gmail data or all of your Google account. Or for example, another example of kind of the data we provide that we don't necessarily know that's being used is all the voice assistants, such as Siri or the Google Voice, etc. Right? I guess most people were kind of aware that that data is being processed, but they didn't know the extent until last year, it came out that there was actual people listening to this to improve these technologies. So I think it's kind of, these companies collect our data in a lot of different ways, which to them may seem transparent or they believe is transparent, but for a lot of people it's not. Even if you go through the privacy policies in a detailed way, it's still kind of difficult to figure out what exactly they're collecting.
Yeah, that's interesting about the voice assistants. We just did an episode on that and found it very surprising to see. You can go back and see everything you've said to your Amazon Echo and your Google Home. And a lot of people just don't know where those settings are or how to remove that information.
Yeah, I think definitely. And, some of the companies have paused that. Some have said they're not doing it. And then recently it came out that one of the whistleblowers from Apple actually said that they're continuing to do this despite promising to stop. And a lot of the kind of data collection even happens when people aren't directly talking to the voice assistants, which is obviously a cause for concern.
Yep. Oh, definitely. And now a word from our sponsor, Edgewise Networks. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved are flat networks in cloud and data centers, with unprotected attack paths that allow threats to move laterally to cause data breaches. But microsegmentation using network addresses is complicated and takes too much time. But there's a better approach. Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable. At the core of Edgewise Auto Segmentation is Zero Trust Identity. which allows workloads to communicate only after their software identity has been verified. Malicious or unimproved software is no longer allowed to communicate. Identity-based protection provides more coverage with fewer policies to make Edgewise simple to deploy and manage. No changes to the application or network are required. One solution protects virtual machines and containers in the cloud and on-premises. To stop lateral threat movement and prevent breaches, visit edgewise.net for a demo and to see results within minutes. So, we had mentioned Apple, Facebook, Twitter, and Google. Who out of those four companies do you think do the best at handling our personal data, and who's the worst?
Well, I really think this is a matter of personal opinion. I think different people, have different levels of trust with all of these companies. And it really depends on what kind of data you're comfortable with providing, how you feel about the company, and so on. And I think that, of course, Facebook and Google tend to get the brunt of the kind of media attention. They're the ones that always come up with, Facebook did this, Google did this. Yep. But Apple and Twitter also have had quite a few mishaps. So, Twitter has had several data breaches. They just had that instance where a bunch of the celebrities were, their accounts were used to get Bitcoins. Yep. Which they're still trying to figure out the cause for that, whether that was social engineering or something else happened. But also Twitter, has had other situations related to privacy. So earlier this year, kind of somewhere recently, they changed their policy on third-party advertising. So it used to be that you could opt out, and now they kind of opted everybody in by default, more or less, unless you're in Europe. And obviously with Apple, again, the case I brought up with the whistleblower and Siri still collecting people's data. So I do think that it depends on your personal preference, which company you feel like you're most comfortable sharing your data with. But you do also have to realize that sometimes these companies do collect data even if you don't want them to. So I'm sure you've talked about this on your show, but shadow profiles, right? So Facebook and Google basically creating profiles about people even though they're not aware of these profiles existing about them.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to think about shadow profiles and all of that, for sure. So where do people go to get to see, how their data is being used, and how can they delete or remove what's been collected?
So it would depend on where you're from, because there's different data protection laws in different countries. If we're talking about specifically the four companies we're talking about, I believe all of them have a special link where you can go and delete or view your data. I can show you what Google's looks like if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So this is the page. Well, it's called myaccount.google, but if you log into your account, and this is a test account, this doesn't belong to anybody, if for privacy reasons, obviously. But if you go to your account and you click on manage your account, you'll be taken to this page. And you can go to privacy and personalization, manage your data. And here you have a bunch of options. So first of all, you have different kinds of activity controls where you can pause what data is saved about you. So your location history, the YouTube history, so what videos you watched, et cetera, et cetera. You can also turn off your ad personalization to make sure that Google isn't using your data to show you ads, if that's what you prefer. You can also view your activity, things you've searched for, read, and watched, or look at your location history. And then if you scroll down, you'll see that you can get a copy of your data by clicking here, or you can delete a service or your account. So if you go here, you can delete a particular service. So if you want to delete your data related to YouTube or Gmail, you can do that here. Or you can delete your entire Google account. So I'm not going to click on this here, but if you do click on it, it'll ask you to confirm, first of all, your password. And then it will remind you that you can download your data, and it will ask you to agree to a couple of things, that you're okay with your data being deleted. And also that if you owe money and you delete your account, then you're kind of not gonna sue Google, essentially, that it's your responsibility. So it's all pretty simple. But I do want to say, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I do also want to say that although a lot of companies, including obviously Google and Facebook, have these links that make it easier to get copies of your data or delete it. Under the GDPR, you actually have a right to make a request in any way you'd like, even verbally. So a lot of times people come across difficulties where they forget their password or something like that. And they have really difficult time talking to Facebook and Google, which is a huge issue because technically Google and Facebook and all the other companies have to let you access or delete your data even if you're not going through the link. Obviously, they would still need to confirm your identity to, prove that, this data belongs to you.
Right.
But you don't have to use a link if you don't want to. But you may come across difficulties if you don't.
So it's safe to assume, mainly because of GDPR and other privacy regulations around the world, that, Facebook and Twitter and Apple, they give you options to view your data, view what they've collected about you, as well as ways to delete that information.
Yes, that's correct. So a lot of the international companies, because even if they're originally, say, from the United States, because they, what the GDPR calls target, the European Economic Area, and they have a lot of users in Europe, they have to abide by the GDPR. So instead of, specifically only allowing Europeans to get copies of their data or delete it, they've made it available for everyone. And kind of as more countries, oh, my hand just disappeared, as more countries and states in the United States have been adopting different regulations and laws, it makes it easier for them as well to kind of, make sure everybody has access to this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we'll have some links in the show notes for our listeners that have different walkthroughs, the Google walkthrough that you did. I know I've seen ones for Facebook and for Twitter, Twitter probably being the least, because it's much smaller in terms of what you can do or where your data goes compared to, say, Google or even Facebook, which I think are a little more complicated. But I'm really glad you showed Google in your demo, because I think for most people, they see Google as, oh my gosh, I use Google Docs and I use Gmail and I use all of these Google services and of course, browsing history. That could be a whole topic in itself, right? Of how Google collects that. And I think it's good for people to see that you can go in and you can remove some of this information and at least make yourself more aware of what these companies are tracking.
Definitely. And I think that as people become more aware, you're able to make choices about your data, which is actually why I'm a big proponent of first getting a copy of your data before deleting anything, because it gives you an idea of the kind of data that's collected. And actually, you're allowed to delete a part of your data. So for example, because a lot of times if you delete your data completely, that means you can no longer use the service. Because obviously for something like Google, they are going to need your name. They are going to need some kind of information about you. So if you delete it, you can't use it. But you can, for example, with a lot of organizations say, okay, I want you to delete all of my location history. So you have that. I don't want you to have that, but I do want to keep using your services so you can retain the rest of my data, for example.
Yep. Excellent. So Kira, where can our listeners learn more about Undatify?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, which is undatify.me, or you can follow us on social media. On most social media platforms, we're either Undatify Me or Undatify. So we have an Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter.
Excellent. And we will be doing an Instagram live here. If you're listening to this episode, which will be on Monday, we'll be doing that, I believe, on Tuesday, the day after. So stay tuned for that. And we'll be posting that, of course, on Instagram and other social media channels. So if you have questions for Kira about how to remove your data from the different tech companies that we talked about today, we'll be able to answer those questions for you. And of course, maybe learn a little bit more about Undatify as well.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Well, thanks for hopping on the show. Really appreciate it. Great topic. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
That's all for this week's show. Visit our website, sharedsecurity.net, for all previous episodes and to sign up for our email newsletter. First-time listener to the show? Please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the Shared Security Show.